What's up guys, welcome to this review of Deathloop. Deathloop is the latest game from Arcane, who works for Bethesda, who works for Xbox and Microsoft now. This game is a time loop game. You play as Cole, who you're seeing in the background right now. You wake up with no memory of what's going on, you're in a time loop. Every time you die you have to restart the day. And as it turns out, there are people called visionaries on this island that you are on. And there's some scientific experiments going on. The only way to end the time loop is to kill all the visionaries in the same day. However, they're never in the same place at the same time, so you've got to try and work it out. How do you get them in the same place? How do you figure it out how to kill them all in one day? Well, that's part of the mystery. At the same time though, you've got Juliana, this mysterious character who clearly has some sort of relationship with Colt, who keeps popping up and trying to kill you. And if you're playing this in a multiplayer sense, Juliana can be played by other people in the real world popping into your game, and it adds a very tense, stressful level of challenge to this. Overall, what did I think of Deathloop? I think it's great. Deathloop is without a doubt one of the games of the year this year. It's so fun, so entertaining. The story, the characters, the gunplay, the stealth, everything is just kind of from good to great. It's really well done, really well thought out. So let's talk about the gameplay, for example, first. There is gunplay, there is stealth, there is exploration and discovery. So we'll talk about stealth. The stealth is probably the most basic form of gameplay in here. If you've ever played a first-person stealth game before, this kind of just does that. You are crouching down, you are hiding behind walls and so on, you are sneaking up on people and doing takedowns, breaking their neck in cool, interesting ways. There are already so many stealth takedowns you can do though. The animations do get a bit repetitive. You've got a machete, you can do that violently and stab them in the back and so on. But it is very traditional stealth. There are powers called slabs you can get, where if you kill a visionary you get their slab. Some of them turn you invisible, one of them can like zap you across the map in a certain amount of time, and there are a bunch of different powers, like they're almost like force powers in a way, where you can force push someone back, turn invisible, portal yourself across the map. They're all a little cool, and these add elements to the stealth and the gunplay. They add a little bit of variety and tactics and excitement to things. So the stealth is basic. In terms of how the AI is, this is probably the most critical element of the game, in that the AI is very basic when it comes to the stealth. If you get detected, the AI will swarm on you and try to fight you. You can then hide, and then the AI will stop looking for you. They might be a bit more vigilant, but they won't hunt you down, they won't chase you across the map looking for you. There's also the fact that shadows and darkness doesn't seem to play a factor in it at all. So that's weird for a stealth game. If you are in the shadows, if you are in darkness, guess what? You aren't hidden. You are just sitting there and the enemies can see you. That's a bit disappointing. So yeah, stealth is good, it's formidable, but it's not the best element of this game. Now let's talk about the gunplay. This really is a fun area of this game. If you played games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, controls are very similar in that regard, and all I can say about this is that the weapons are limited. There's not a huge amount of weapons. You've got like your shotguns, you've got your handguns, you've got your submachine guns, machine guns. None of these are real weapons, by the way. They're all fictionalized weapons, but they all feel really cool. They all have their unique perks and personalities and ways of working. They all pack a punch is what the best thing I can say about this. Playing this on a PS5, you've obviously got the DualSense integration in here, so every time you shoot a weapon it feels a little different in your hands. That's really cool. It's not a huge factor, but it's there and it adds to it. But the weapons are very reliable. There are moments where they jam and you've got to figure them out. There are some weapons where you can get little perks and trinkets and add to them, so you can get like maybe more shots. The more you fire, the more accurate it becomes and stuff like that. And there's ones where, hey, all of your shots are headshots now. So that's what they go for. The enemies can get perks as well, which then counteracts some of that as well. Just some of them. But the weapons are cool and interesting. You can unlock some, you can unlock more badass, powerful weapons by doing the Arsenal line of quests, where there are several quests where you can eventually unlock weapons and gadgets and gear and gizmos to help you out, and that's really cool. So gunplay, cool. It's what you expect really. Each weapon packs a punch, it feels really good, and that's the best thing about it. Stealth, pretty generic, but it works, and it's a good fun play way of playing it. Mixed in there, you've got the exploration and discovery. So much of the story relies on you exploring the island, exploring these locations, getting documents and files and listening in on conversations and getting information. If you're not doing that, you're not going to know what's going on. You're not going to have all of these hints and knowledge about like, oh, someone's talking about a sneaky way into this building, right? So if you listen to that, you know about that location now. The game does a good job at remembering things for you. So if you listen to a conversation you're hearing, all of a sudden you'll get a notification, hey, that's a piece of information, it's now added into your journal. So you don't have to literally remember all this, you don't have to take all the notes, the game does that for you, which is brilliant because there's a lot of stuff going on here. And if you want to pick up a document but don't want to read it because it's long or whatever, guess what? There's a note form of it as well that comes up as well, where code just sums it up. So you can read like a full, like 2-page document on something, and then all of a sudden there's no form saying, yeah, such and such character is going to be here. Great. The game is really good at condensing things down and simplifying things if that's what you want. And that's brilliant in terms of the exploration and discovery. But again, a lot of the story relies on that. So you have to do that to make sense of it all. Otherwise, it's just the gameplay, which is fine in itself. But I think the story and the characters is what elevates everything a bit more. But how does the game actually play out? Are you just on this open world island? No, not exactly. The island's split into 4 sections. And you can visit one of these sections at different times of the day. So you've got time periods: morning, midday, afternoon, evening. So in each one of these time periods, you can visit one of the locations of the island. And as long as you're there, time stands still. You can do as much as you want in that location, so long as you stay alive. So in the morning, you can go to one location. Once you're done there, leave. Then guess what? It's noon now. You can go somewhere else if you want. Or you can skip a time period entirely and go to a different location at a different time of day. If, for example, you start the day, but you're like, hey, I can't do anything until it becomes evening. Well, you can skip right to the evening and then go and do that as well. That's how the time loop plays out. And at the end of the day, if you're carrying certain weapons, you can then use residium to keep them so that you don't have to keep finding these items and weapons around the world. As long as you've got enough residium, that is a resource you have to gather throughout the game. And that's really cool because it means that every time you're in a time loop, you are picking up knowledge and information that's then stored in your journal, that's stored in your inventory as long as you've got residium. So it constantly feels like you're achieving something, even if it's nothing grand or unique. If you fail to kill a visionary on one of your runs, for example, that's not a bad thing, because guess what? You probably learned something before that. And that's really cool. The game's constantly rewarding you. But yes, you can play this game in an open fashion. It's not a huge open world in the scale of like Grand Theft Auto. Each of the 4 locations does have a lot of variety in there. There's one location, for example, where there's like this underground bunker. But then in the other side of that one location, there's this fancy like grotto going on. And then there's like a quarry as well. It's like, there's a lot of variety in these 4 different locations, even if they're not huge open world maps. You can explore these open world maps to your heart's content, basically. But they're not open world in the same sense like Grand Theft Auto. But at the same time, you can choose visionary quests. So there are 8 visionaries, I believe that is. And the main quest line is you need to complete each of the 8 visionary quests. Once you complete those quests, you unlock the end quest, which is the one where it brings everything together and leads you to the finale. These 8 quests are all different and unique and special, and they all have the unique quirks and elements to them. But what this means is you can actually play this game as a very straightforward linear single player experience, where it does say, right, go here, learn this, explore this area, find this person, and so on and so forth. It's not linear in that it's holding your hand exactly. You still have to do things for yourself, you still have to learn things for yourself, but it does point you in the right direction, and that's really cool. And I think that's the best thing about this game. As someone who likes single player narrative driven games, you could totally experience this game like that. But one thing that I have to say is about the end. Without spoiling the ending and saying what the end is, there are multiple endings. They're all kind of variations of the same thing, where you just basically make a choice. But once you get to the ending is a little abrupt. It felt like they put a lot of emphasis into the journey and the core gameplay, and then it's like, right, how do we wrap this up? Alright, we'll just do this. It feels like the end is a little throwaway. It feels like the end doesn't quite justify the journey. And it left things a little open for me. A lot of the story does rely on you picking up these documents and files and so on. And I feel like that's where you get all of these points across. Any of the mysteries you have, they're kind of solved before the ending, so long as you look for them. And the ending really only does try to sum up the main plot points as fast as it can, which was a bit disappointing. But that final mission strand that I said, which unlocks once you've done all the visionary quests, is brilliant. That final string of missions where you do try to do this loop, this one day kill them all kind of thing, and then get to the end, is brilliant. That is a really epic thing. It pulls everything together, relying on all your knowledge and everything you've learned and developed and got throughout the game. And it works really well. So the time loop as well, like I said, it's split into 4 different sections of a map and 4 different time periods. Each section is different at different time periods, it's worth saying. So you could go to one location in the morning, well guess what? That location in the evening is very different. There might be snow there in the evening. Certain characters and enemies might be gone at that point. Maybe there's some booby traps laid out in the evening now. Or maybe there's something else going on. Maybe if you go to one location in the morning, there's this building there. Maybe if you go to that location in the evening, guess what? That building's burnt down. So there's a lot of stuff like that where you do have to figure things out. You do have to go around and try and experiment with the time periods and different times of day to learn different things, to get some knowledge. And that's one of the most interesting, exciting things about this. So I talked about how the game keeps track of everything. Well, yes, it does that. You go into the menus, you've got this journal where it keeps track of all the information you gathered, it keeps track of all the objectives and missions you've got, and as well as things of like your loadout, the weapons and items and so on and so forth. The menus aren't great. I do think this is actually one of the weaknesses of the game. I think the menus are a little clunky and hard to navigate. There's a big learning curve to the menus, I think. But I did get the hang of it eventually. It just took me a little longer than I wanted. So let's talk a bit more about the production side of things. Voice acting is brilliant. I don't know who does the voice acting for Colt, but he's great. I hope he actually gets like a game award for best voice actor or something like that, because he is really likable. He's constantly got something to say, he's constantly commenting on things going on around him, because he can see like dialogue on the screen popping up in the environment and so on. Juliana's constantly chiming in and trying to like taunt him and talk about stuff going on. Every time you start a new day, they have like this little exchange of words, and I don't think they ever repeated anything. I imagine there's a bunch of dialogue and conversations that I've never even experienced yet. There's a ton of dialogue in this game, a ton of different character interactions in this game. It's really, really good in that regard, and the voice acting is brilliant across the board. Colt and Juliana are the more interesting characters. The Visionaries are not quite that interesting. A lot of the stuff about the Visionaries does rely on you looking up the information on them. You kind of got to piece together who these people are. They're not presented in the same way as Juliana and Colt. But Juliana and Colt, great relationship between them, great antagonistic relationship. A lot of good comedy in there between these two. The voice acting is brilliant. Visually, the game is good looking. Playing this on a PS5, it's good resolution. One of the little things that was bugging me is that the dark scenes, instead of being like black and dark, it was more like a navy blue, which is a little disappointing. No matter how I adjusted my TV or the brightness settings, that's what it was. So that's just kind of how the game is. A little weird, not a huge deal, but it's there. And having finished the game and the main story, still tons of things I can do. There's still a lot of puzzles I can do. There's still a lot of documents and files I can find. Still a lot of story elements I can discover and learn. Things to learn about the characters and locations. Still a lot of weapons I can find and discover. Still some arsenal. I'm struggling with the word. You've got these visionary quests and arsenal quests. There's still a lot of them arsenal quests that I can do as well, because those didn't feel necessary or essential to me. But some of the prizes there are really cool. And for the record, I probably played about 20 hours of this game. I did play it primarily as a linear, narrative-driven game, going from point to point as the game dictated. There were some elements where I did try to branch out and explore a bit. You can play as Juliana and pop into other players' games. That adds an element in there. That's really cool as well, because it gives you a new perspective on certain things, on different gameplay mechanics and weapons and tools and slabs and different powers and abilities as well. So I encourage you to go and play Juliana. I didn't do too much of that though, so I can't comment on that a huge amount. But it does add some variety and helps make the game bigger and add some depth. But speaking of the Juliana thing, when you're on the other end of it, when you are Colt and you are trying to do your objective and all of a sudden Juliana's on the hunt, it's constantly stressful. It constantly freaks you out and gets kind of knocks you off guard a bit, because you could be going through this level. Each level, by the way, you have 3 lives, so you can die twice before the day resets. So you can go into a location, die, right, it zips you back to the start of that location, do it again, die, it zips you back to the start. If you die again, that's it, the day's over, you've got to do the whole day again. So when Juliana comes in, it's really threatening, especially if you're on an objective. You could go to an objective, do it, and then guess what? You've got to escape. But if Juliana's there, the escape's blocked. You've got to kill Juliana and get rid of the radio. In fact, you don't have to kill Juliana at all. You've got to destroy her radio antenna thing in order to escape. This really adds a exciting, stressful element to the game, and if you're playing against good players, guess what? You're going to struggle. Eventually, it did kind of become a bit annoying because I did just want to get through it. I did want to just do the objective and be at peace and have the story unfold before me, and I felt like Juliana was kind of taking me out of it a bit. There was one point where, early on when playing this game, I was rarely ever seeing Juliana. But then towards the back end of the game, it felt like every other 5 minutes, Juliana kept attacking me, and it was annoying. But it is a cool feature, and I like it. And it's always satisfying when you do actually kill Juliana, because Juliana seems like she has a lot more knowledge and abilities than Colt, so she has a bit of an edge. So it's always satisfying when you overcome that. And final thing I want to talk about is the whole look and vibe of the game. I've talked about the visuals a bit more, but this is set in the 60s. So it's got very cool 60s aesthetic and music and score and soundtrack and locations and so on. And it's brilliant. It really does a good job. It's really cool visually and stylistically. And that's Deathloop. That's my review of Deathloop. Like I said, I think this is a Game of the Year contender. It's one of my favorite games this year. I don't know if I'm going to go back now that I finished it. Like I said, I have got a lot of stuff that I could still do, but I don't really feel the need to do that. I'm very satisfied with the ending that I got. I've explored what some of the other endings are, and there's not a huge deal of variety there. It's just a couple of different lines of dialogue basically and different ways of summing things up. But yeah, I like this game a lot. I think it's super fun. I'm not a first-person shooter guy. I don't like first-person shooters. So the fact that I like this game is saying something. I think the fact that it is very character and story driven is what sets it apart from other first-person shooters. The first-person shooter mechanics are really good, really likable. The fact that you can do it stealthily, you can explore, you can go in and do the story stuff, and you can do the shooting and gunning and all that stuff as well, is what really makes this game really super fun and cool. So yeah, that's my review of Deathloop. Why not subscribe to my channel to get more content like this, and of course follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant_Burton, and follow me on twitch.tv/the_Grant_Burton as well. Until next time though, thanks for watching.